sorry, go.
I would just like to remind us to really enunciate the word portal.
Yeah.
It could sound
portal. Portal.
like something else.
God, Dean it.
You know, I never get tired of this theme song. I never get tired of the intros used for it. I want to give a spectacular shout out to Bibo for his amazing choices for these openings. So, like, just to go on that note, what an amazing song by Dean, amazing editing by Bibo, amazing vocals by all three of us. Sorry, you just gotta
Such
shoot her
songers. Amazing.
Welcome to BetaBeard episode 11. An episode unlike most, where today's theme will be much more free flow than what we normally have. Today we are going to be talking about just fantasy in general, that topic of broad stroke fantasy tropes, what we love, properties that we feel don't get enough love. And between the three of us, I'm sure we're going to find a lot of common ground and not so common ground and red zones and common ground, not so common ground. And I think one of the things I want to be able to communicate the most in this is talking out to the audience who happens to be watching. We've developed some sort of like a small little avid community that watches of our friends and loved ones and whoever happens to be tuning in. When it comes to the topic of fantasy, by the end of the episode, if you want to leave any comments, of some fantasies that you know about that are underappreciated. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And
not fantasies in that sense, just fantasy as a genre, you know.
Let's yeah.
Let's get it ready for our first
true.
Rule 34, gentlemen. Let's.
Yes. And I'm very happy to report that 1 week later, and no dreams of Midsommar that have ruined my evenings. I was worried about it, but I had pretty good sleeps this week.
I will say that the drive home alone at night after watching Midsommar at the cinema for the first time was not an enjoyable one for myself.
Oh man, I can't imagine driving home from Hereditary. George, you haven't seen Hereditary, but can you imagine driving home after seeing Hereditary? I will.
Dude, you know what? Like, for some reason, like you know how when you're driving alone at night, there's like a similar sensation to like when you're swimming in the pool and you just think there's a shark chasing you.
Yeah.
Like when you keep looking at the mirror behind, like looking for like, and you just think like someone will pop up in the back seat, then you drive faster home because you're like, I want to get. It's like it always happens. It happened to me a lot when I would drive in my. This is a funny topic because. In the Philippines, we call them villages in my village, but you know, in like the United States, when you say like, yeah, that was my village, it's like a village, like huts. It's like, no, villages in the Philippines are gated communities.
Yeah.
In my gated community, there were a lot of haunted spots of like, you know, I mean, trees that are haunted, or driving by schools and stuff, and places that are known. Whenever you drive by, there's always that little chill.
Oh man, sorry, you just reminded me of like the number one thing I always got asked in England when people found out that I have Filipino blood, and they're like, first of all, the first thing that they always say is, "Oh man, you speak such good English," which is so annoying.
Always, every time,
and then the second thing that they always say for some reason, and like this is not an isolated incident. This happens so much. Is that like, I thought you all lived in huts.
Dude,
that's a real thing.
That's exactly why I bring it up. I that's absolutely it. It's like there's buildings here. It's like, yeah. Dude. Yeah, there are. It's not that bad. We're not hunting our food for sure. But you know what? Interesting
That's
topic
Americans.
on that, Bibo.
Sorry.
And this is something that I think Dean and I have had sort of similarities on, and I love how great start to my timer for talking about fantasy.
Sorry.
No. Yeah, but we're gonna make it this time, guys. It's the one. It's the episode. But Bibo, I just wanted to actually I want to actually dedicate one of my episodes. I definitely want to dedicate to this because if COVID as like a, this is like the trailer to one of my episodes. If COVID taught me anything about myself, it's that I kind of, the wave hit me of understanding that, oh shit, I'm a third culture kid. Like, that doesn't really fit in and doesn't really have roots that I connect to.
Yeah.
Like my feet aren't connected to the earth. Like, my ancestors weren't here, but I'm Filipino. I'm definitely more Filipino than like your Phil Am, who has more Filipino like ancestry within him, or more Filipino blood, or
Right.
looks more Filipino. I'm technically more Filipino than that dude. Like, I grew up speaking Tagalog. I grew up like and that was a whole thing for me. I just drank Coke and I saved my burp. Okay, there it is. I see. For you, audience, I swallowed my burp. But yeah, for COVID, and it happened because, like, I'm not sure if Bibo, if you relate to it. I'm sure you do. But when you're younger, I always went through this thing of I would see like the Philippines like mentioned in movies, or anytime a show is like, yeah, Chandler had one line. It's like, yeah, some Filipino kids, and I'd just be like, oh, Philippines mentioned. Wow, cool, pride. That's so awesome. Like, my country is being mentioned. But then recently in during COVID, I watched the Jokoy special on Netflix, and his whole thing was he brought in Filipino Phil-Ams to like do little segments during his set, and it got mixed response and mixed reviews. And in a moment where I know I should have been feeling nothing but pride seeing this Netflix thing with like all these Filipinos, I realized that, oh, that feeling that I'm so used to getting like from when I was a kid, it's not there. I mean, like that connection to like this. And I think that happened over my year as a performer, being lumped into, whenever I do productions, I'd always be lumped into the international cast. Like, international cast, George Schulze is like, whoa, no, I'm not I'm Filipino. I had access to the same workshops and training that all other Filipinos did. Like, don't put me in the international group. I'm not there. Anyway, that is the pretext to what I want to jump into one of these days. But we are talking fantasy today, and I'm going to jump off this topic of Filipinos and maybe start it with us as young men who have grown up in the Philippines. When I say fantasy, what comes into your mind? What is your image of like fantasy? Bibo, let's start with you.
Well, first off, it's so funny that you brought up Jokoy and his special in Soler. I separately had a conversation about this with another friend, and I kind of got deep into it in the past couple of days. It's so funny that
cool,
that you did the same thing.
Dude, if you wanna jump into it,
no, it's fine. We can get into it
go
at a
for
later date. But yeah, it definitely was a strange special, to say the least. Anyway, fantasy. So we said we'd start off this episode by sort of like defining what fantasy is for us, right? And to me, it's real simple. Because you can get into that whole semantics game of like, oh, you could argue that this is fantasy because like it follows the tropes and the. But you know what? For me, it's simple. It's just it's D&D plus. That's all it is. Like mages, wizards, knights, all that stuff. If it fits into that it some people may balk at that, but like that's what fantasy is for me.
Okay, Harry Potter doesn't have knights, but it has elves, it has trolls, well, not elves in high fantasy elves, but elves in like, different like smaller creature elves. Would you count Harry Potter as
I guess genre? You'd have to, just by default. They are at a school for what is it?
Wizards.
Witches and wizards.
Witchcraft and
wizardry.
wizardry.
High fantasy, right?
Oh,
and that's
funny enough. I'm wearing my Harry Potter.
Yeah,
I didn't even plan that. This was just my outfit for the day.
But it's definitely not what we first think of when we think of the genre, right? Because like Harry Potter is like this. It's kind of its own entity that has certain fantasy tropes contained within it. I just wanted to say that I have this weird, complicated relationship with fantasy as a genre today, just because when I was younger, I would have definitely said that it was my go-to genre as far as what interested me, what would get my creative juices going. particularly because of going off of playing like Final Fantasy games growing up and stuff like that. But lately I've realized that I'm not quite as into fantasy as I thought I was. I would definitely say I lean more toward the sci-fi, space stuff more than the robes and rogues genre. But I enjoy it. It's just that I don't engage with it as much these days anymore because there are certain trends that don't really speak to me so much. And I mentioned, I think I may have just said it to you guys, maybe not on an episode, but like I don't appreciate being pandered to, and I feel like fantasy as a genre is such an easy thing for creators to like put in like all the standard tropes just to appeal to a certain demographic, to a certain type of fantasy fan. Like, oh, there are mages and there are swords and there are spells. I'm in. Like that. That just like that bothers me a little bit. So
yeah.
So
would you say like you kind of appreciate more world building similar to like Dune, like nowadays?
Definitely,
like more
100%,
like space politics, like because Dune is essentially like space Game of Thrones, right? But the godfather of sci-fi in a way.
Yeah, like I'd say the less, this is such a lazy term, but the less video gamey the fantasy, the more interested I'll be in it. I may still like it if it's Warcraft as opposed to Tolkien, right? But what I would choose to consume more is the thing that feels more fresh as opposed to the same D&D stuff that I've kind of grown up on. What about you, Dean?
I would love to touch on D&D though,
dude.
after at some point in this episode because I love D&D and
I mean the godfather
but Dean,
of RPGs. I love so fantasy is by far my favorite genre. I mean, I've already mentioned on this podcast before my favorite movie of all time is Return of the King. I love Tolkien. I don't so much hold Tolkien to be the beholden god of all fantasy. I know that their fantasy writing has come a long way since Tolkien. But unfortunately, the thing about fantasy that really frustrates me is that I can't consume it at the same rate as other people can consume it because I'm dyslexic. So I can't read. Yeah. And most of, I can read, but it takes me so long to read. Like, how long...
Have you tried audiobooks?
Absolutely. I've tried. That's how I usually consume books. But the thing about audiobooks is that, you look at the time and it's like 16 hours or whatever. And you're like, oh yeah, cool. I could get through this in a week. No, you have no idea how long 16 hours of like content, talking, like when you actually break it up, how long that actually takes you to finish and like all the things that can get in the way. Like if you just think of like, if you listen to it like an hour a day, that's like 16 weeks to finish like maybe a saga of books, or maybe even just one book in some instances, So I do listen to audiobooks, but it's definitely I wish I could just read the way that other people read, because I could consume so much more fantasy, so much. And I'm like Bibo said, like I think I'm one of those people because I'm also a real history buff. I love the medieval period, so that sort of trope that fantasy falls into a lot of being set within a make-believe medieval period. High fantasy. And high fantasy is my favorite. Like you were mentioning high fantasy before, George. I would say that Harry Potter is low fantasy because in terms of genre, low fantasy means that it's a fantasy world that exists within our real world.
Right.
So
okay, all right,
yeah,
cool.
That's sort of the definition of low fantasy.
Is that the literary like distinction? Because I've never really gotten a grasp on what high fantasy necessarily entails. So
if that's as I understand it, and I of course I could be mistaken, but as I understand it, high fantasy is set within a make-believe universe, and low fantasy is set within our universe. So Harry Potter it's also considered portal fantasy. So, like, for example, like the new game that's coming out, Forspoken, is like a perfect example of portal fantasy. Harry Potter is like arguably portal fantasy because portal fantasy is being taken from the normal world into a high fantasy world.
I would just like to remind us to really enunciate the word portal, because it could sound very much like something else, especially attached to the word fantasy. Anyway, sorry.
Portal fantasy. But me personally, I love high fantasy. I love, unfortunately, so many of the tropes that might be considered trite at this point because they've been done so much. I love elves. I love Tolkien-esque elves.
Right.
I love the idea of like the way that because that's not necessarily the way that elves and dwarves were portrayed in the Edda. Like, for example, the Edda never says that dwarves or the Dvarg from Svartalfheim were short. It just mentions that two dwarves in particular, two brothers, were short. And that's where this whole idea of dwarves being short comes from. So, I love the Tolkien-esque version of that. And I love that the way that people put spins on that. But there are some tropes that happen in fantasy, whether it be medieval and stuff like that, that I am sick of as well. And that I think it's a very subjective thing that we could get into.
I think I have a feeling like obviously Tolkien is going to come up a lot, and when you talk about this genre, and it's just when it comes to elves, like for example, when it comes to elves, it's like it just doesn't get any better than Lord of the Rings version of elves for me personally. I'm sure there are a lot of really good spins on it, but it's just like these are elves to me. Like this is an elf. It's Galadriel. This is what an elf is, and everything else is sort of just a spin on that to me. I don't know. I may be a normie for saying that, but that's just the effect that Lord of the Rings has to me as far as the fantasy.
That's the thing
goes.
Is it's so influential, right? And so much of what we know about Norse mythology is actually the interpretation of Norse mythology that authors like Tolkien, put into their novels rather than the actual poems and songs from the Edda and stuff that we know from history. But
I actually have a book over there. Have you read Neil Gaiman's Norse mythology? I haven't gotten through really any of it, but I bought it just because I was so interested.
Yeah. I mean, I love his takes on mythology. So that's bound to be good, right?
So George, you say you have like recommendations for like unheralded or under-celebrated fantasy properties.
Well, I definitely want to get into that. Especially like one of my, I guess if I was to have a recommendation of a series, it would be something I definitely will talk about. But it's very interesting, Dean, and how because I love the fantasy genre, but I look at it from the perspective, I think, similar to Bibo in that I am a person who appreciates fantasy. And Bibo, if you're deeper within this, then that's my bad for comparing myself to you. And but I always appreciated it as a person who was really more into like comic books. Mm-hmm. And looking at fantasy and being like, God, that's super freaking awesome, but not really understanding the intricacies and the different worlds and the definitions and meanings. Like I don't even know if the first ever written elves and dwarves were from the Tolkien books. I wouldn't know all of these factoids, and I'm so happy to be educated on it. What I do know is that this genre is something that, I think I believe I mentioned it in an episode of the podcast that like A Knight's Tale to begin with. It's like one of my favorite movies of all time, and just anything knights, magic, swordsmanship, just has always just gone so far for me. In terms of like being able to invest in the world, like the simple stories of Arthur, of Merlin, Morgana, all of these like magical heroic stories have always been the basis of what I wanted. I talked to Dean actually about me as a kid, and an interesting conversation I had recently was, we're in our 30s now, boys. We're about to hit the 36 point, which is the by Midsommar's explanation, the second the second quarter of our life cycle. We are in our pilgrimage phase. We are in our pilgrimage phase, and being young men of like 31, 32, I think that's our age range between the three of us. It's the question I have been asking myself is, how have your dreams evolved from the ages of when you were a kid? And I asked Dean this recently. When you were a kid, what were your dreams like? How did that evolve into your like your late teens, young 20s, and what is it like now? And it's interesting to see how that's evolved. And as a kid, one thing has always stayed true. I've always wanted to be an actor. That's always just been what it was. But I didn't want to be like a serious actor when I was a kid. I wanted to be an actor for films like Lord of the Rings, for like a fantasy trilogy series that I could live in this world, that I could be a character, and I had no issues being known forever as a character, like how Kit Harington is forever kind of going to be Jon Snow. You know, I mean, I had no issue with that concept of like, I would love to be a really popular character in a world and everybody refers to me as that character. That's just something I've always like kind of been like a geek over. So yeah, when I think of fantasy, I definitely think of that magic, the magic of like, I am about to like watch something that's going to transport me into this world. Similar to Bibo, I'm not sure if you've ever played it, but Dean has. Have you ever played Kingdom Come Deliverance?
No, I have not. What is this?
Have you ever heard of it?
No.
Kingdom Come Deliverance is so interesting in that it sets you in a medieval period, but the catch is you are a peasant.
I love that. I love that.
And you are no one special. You're just a blacksmith's son, and how special you are really depends on how you play the game.
Yeah.
And like, you know, I mean, and the learning archery is as hassle as you'd think it is in like real life. Like you start archery and you're like, this is so hard. I suck at this.
Dude,
you have to practice.
To say, sorry to interrupt, but I would go so far as to say, and I can say this because I backed that fucking game. Like, I was one of the Kickstarter
Dean was
backers.
One of the backers, yeah.
I didn't put much, but I did put something. I put enough for them to give me a free game. But like,
and your name in the credits, I assume.
I think my username is in the credits. Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
But the what do you call it? The archery in Kingdom Come Deliverance, and I say this as someone who really loves the game and would recommend this game. It's harder than archery in real life. We know this, George, as people who tried archery. And also, I will say that the longsword fighting, because we've also done a little bit of training in longsword, George, you and me, is harder than longsword sparring in real life. I'm not even joking about that.
But in an amazing way. It's like, it's intuitive, and you like, Bibo, this is a game where you're only as good as the work you put in.
Okay.
So like, you'll start off and like a group of bandits will really be like, oh my god, I gotta run. This is a group of bandits. Dude. I know I have a sword, but there's nothing I can do. It's a group of bandits with knives. I'm dead.
Oh, dude, you're speaking to me so
towards
much
now. Towards a certain point, you look at that group of bandits and you're like, I have practiced my sword play enough to be able to handle this.
Yeah.
And sometimes you don't always make it out, but eventually you're going to look at a group of armored bandits and be like, I know how to poke within that armor.
Yeah.
Because of the work you put into your swordsmanship. And the archery, Bibo, let me tell you, the way it starts you in the archery in that game is you are hunting moving rabbits. And it's hard enough. And it's like, you want to work on your archery? You got to kill rabbits before you can kill deer. Like, and they are tiny and moving, and you have to evolve as an archer.
That's awesome. So
it's cool. Like, your evolution in the game really, and just like any game, I'm a sucker for like tournament arcs, and there are knights tournaments that you can somehow like kind of try and make your way into it. It's a cool game in that you're really a peasant and you feel like one.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I've always been a sucker for that. In general. But before I recommend my personal recommendation, and I think if I wanted to even just bring this episode up, just to even if I'm the only one recommending something that isn't really talked about a lot, I really wanted to discuss this property with you guys. Mm-hmm. Before that, I just want to ask: are there any from your perspectives? Are there any like what right now would you say like is just apart from Lord of the Rings, is your favorite popular low or high fantasy?
Apart from Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, apart from Lord of the Rings, what world would you say is like, wow, this is something you can even put a video game world in there?
Yeah,
I would
put
that as a pass.
I don't. It's not so much like it's my favorite stuff, but it holds a special place in my heart. I'm hoping maybe you guys have played it. It's a little RPG that came out on the Game Boy Advance called Golden Sun.
Golden Sun!
I love it much.
I did play Golden Sun. It's one of my favorite RPGs of all time.
It's so beautiful, yeah. It's not unheralded because it has its fans, but it didn't take off, right? As a franchise. It's Dean, it's basically it's kind of the first game, if I remember. I played it so long ago, I was in grade school. It's a simple battle system. It's just really well done, nice story, simple good versus evil stuff. The battle system is kind of just Final Fantasy light, really. But I think what worked for it is you have instead of having a gaggle of party members, it's just the 4, if I remember correctly, and so you get to focus hard on the characters that are there. Isaac is the main character, I remember. So yeah, I love Golden Sun so much.
Did you play Golden Sun 2 as well?
No, I didn't get to play 2 because
you never got to transfer the file.
No, yeah, because
Wow.
you could transfer your progress.
Oh,
and your
Nintendo was amazing, Dean. Like, but they had these methods.
Not so sure. I got my cartridges from the most reputable,
that's fair.
places,
that's
so
fair.
I couldn't do that. I couldn't transfer my save.
Yeah. You know, Dean, what's so cool about it is that you played as Isaac, who you kind of made into this legendary hero.
Yeah.
And along the way, you meet this band of villains as well that have their own objectives and purposes, but they're kind of anti-heroes. They're like
Team Rocket.
They're not like Team Rocket.
Yeah.
Bibo. Oh.
Sorry, maybe I just don't know enough about Team Rocket anymore. Sorry.
No, we said Team Rocket together. We said it like that was cool. Yeah, so they're not like Team Rocket. They're like a proper group of anti-heroes. But what's cool is you transfer your file of the legendary hero that you made into the second game, and all of the decisions you made are kept, and the file you kept is there. But amazing. The second game takes off, and you control the group of other heroes. You control the group of anti-heroes. So it's a really cool, beautiful game. Really,
that is such a good idea.
Bibo, check out. I'm not sure if you're into tech, but there is this. Have you seen the? I forget the brand of it, but there's basically like a very high tech Game Boy that has recently been made. And one of the games that that can play old Game Boy cartridges, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy cartridges, but it plays it on like a 140p small screen or something like that, and it is the most crisp, smooth footage of Game Boy games I've ever seen.
That's awesome.
And some of the games they demo on it are Golden Sun. So check out. I'm gonna send you a YouTube review later.
Yes, please.
Look at how Golden Sun looks on that thing. It's so sexy. I really love it.
It's so precious. It's so good. It's a
Golden
lovely
Sun's
game.
amazing.
Yeah.
Because I think Dean will agree with me here, and I know he's definitely written his own worlds and stuff, and expressed to me on stories that he's made or games that he's made. But I will say that when it comes to good fantasy, if the construction of your magic systems are really fleshed out, it's so cool. Like when people are really creative with how they go about, introducing their theory crafting behind magic and elves. I mean, behind magic and how that's harnessed from the earth and what the use of that magic means and does. So like that for me is always something I'm a sucker of. And I want to make my 45-minute armor, and here we are at the 30-minute mark already. Jesus Christ. We don't even have topics here. We're just talking about fantasy like three little nerdy boys, and here we are already at the 30-minute mark. But this is a 45-minute average podcast in general. No, it's not. It is an hour podcast. If you're hanging with the boys, it's going to be either for an hour or an hour and 10.
Actually, and if I may, I have a second the second thing that popped into my mind. Sorry, George. Finish your.
No. I'm just saying, like you're here with us for the hour if you want to watch, but if you're working out in the gym, this is a great way to like kill 45 minutes of your time there. Just listening to three boys talk about boy stuff and girl
talk
stuff
about their
and
fantasy.
The word stuff. Yeah, fantasies.
I'm so glad I thought of this because Dean, it's either you've seen this or you'll really get a kick out of it. If you haven't, it's the movie that they clearly got the inspiration for Bloodborne from. Do you know what I'm talking about?
This is the exact outfit comes from this movie, right?
Yeah, it's a French dark fantasy film called Brotherhood of the Wolf, and I love it. It's weird and it's crazy and it's awesome. It's about this French. He's called a naturalist or something. He's sort of like this. He's like an animal scientist or something. He's brought in to this village because a wolf creature has been killing people and they can't get rid of it. They can't figure out why. And the story goes into these weird branches of intrigue and stuff. But it's where they got the outfit with the tricorn hat from. And there's actually my favorite. The only weapon I've ever used in Bloodborne is the cane. George, if you don't know the cane in Bloodborne, it's badass because you get it. It's just the cane, and he whacks people with it. You whack people with it, the main character, he or she, and then but in Bloodborne you can transform your weapon. So if you transform your cane weapon, your character does this, and it becomes a chain whip.
Yeah.
And I love
You know what's interesting? Yeah. Sorry. No, go.
I just love the way it transforms so cool into a chain whip until you turn it back into a cane, and then your character slams it into the ground like a cane, and it's a cane again. It's just so cool.
But the aesthetic of Bloodborne, correct me if I'm wrong, is like the plague doctor mask, right? Like that type of thing, like the
sort of
really.
It's like 18th, 19th
but like
century.
They have like the cloaks and the hat,
definitely.
and then the it's
there
it's
is
like
one,
in
Raven,
Diablo it would be the demon hunter in Diablo, that type of aesthetic.
I'm
more familiar with Bloodborne. Yeah, same.
Okay, okay.
But yeah, Brother of the Wolf
thing, though,
is just just to finish out on Brotherhood of the Wolf. It's just so weird. It's so odd. There's martial arts in it, even though they're in whatever century France. And it's so wild. And yes, there's a chain whip in it made out of bones. It's just really cool dark fantasy. You guys should definitely check it out.
Beebs, if you like that, there's a very, very similar themed dark fantasy that's like kind of within that realm of like it's called The Witcher, and I think you might like there's werewolves and you're hunting them down. And there's an actor, he stars in it. Like, you really love him. He played Superman.
What? Seriously?
Sorry. I do love The Witcher as a fantasy series, though.
I'm sure.
But we're not going to get into that for Bibo's sake. I'm not. That was not one of my choices.
I'm sure it's up there as far as the genre, and I'm sure if I read the books and the watch the show, I'd be super into it. But just like, anyway.
Yeah.
That's
no
the one I was gonna say, to be honest. Like, apart from Lord of the Rings, if I couldn't choose Lord of the Rings, Witcher's up there for me. And that's one of the only audiobooks that I actually have completed, The Last Wish by Andrzej Sapkowski. So,
Interesting.
And but I really love the way that I really love a lot of the lore and the world building of The Witcher.
Yeah.
I love what they
sure.
prioritize.
You know what? As far as my preferences or tastes, if you maybe as far as fantasy goes now, I was so I still like Skyrim as an experience, but like I was kind of disappointed, and I shouldn't have been surprised really, but in that when I first saw the images of the base Dragonborn, right? He looks like this barbarian, and it looked so bare. It looked so like his weapon was just like this plain old axe.
Yeah.
I was like, holy crap, Elder Scrolls is going like super like, like grungy, like it's this
gritty,
yeah,
historical.
it's gritty, fantasy. And I was like, oh man, that'd be so cool. And they're dragons, so I wonder how dragons will be treated in that, with that conceit and that in that context. But when you get to playing Skyrim, it's just still just the same old Elder Scrolls.
Daedric armor.
Yeah, the Daedric armor, dude. It's just so
Daedric
cool.
armor.
It's so spiky and cool and black.
Yeah. Oh my god.
Absolutely. I have to say though.
Yeah.
Nightingale Armor.
Before you do, I will say though, like before you move on to Nightingale from Daedric Armor, the only time I've ever seen a Daedric Armor aesthetic look acceptable is on Sauron. That's about it. For me.
I mean that's where it all comes from, right?
Yeah. Other than that, I've never seen it look like it's just too middle school sickness. Like edgelord world. But anyway, Nightingale Armor.
I love the design of Nightingale Armor, especially the concept art. With Bethesda, the concept art never really translates that well into the final. I still love them though. I love Bethesda games, and I'm playing Fallout 4 right now because it's I'm just a real sucker for the freedom that those games offer. But Nightingale Armor, like if you've ever seen like the concept art from Nightingale Armor, it's just fantastic. That's the kind of cool black chuny armor that I do actually appreciate.
Speaking of Bethesda, by the way, I I just want to tell a real quick story about how Morrowind was just too much for me, and I didn't touch it. Because when I was I like Far Cry was too much for me because I couldn't get my head around the open world concept yet when it came out. Yeah. Same with Morrowind. I met with this guy who had green skin. I don't know what race he was. And I accidentally no, he was skinny. I don't think he was an orc. I don't know what he was. But like
probably like their version of the drow. Like, because the drow had greenish. Like
whatever.
The dark elves.
Yes. I just met him in his house. I had to have some type of dealing with him, and I accidentally like struck him. And I was like, "What's happening? Oh God! How am I gonna finish the quest? Oh no! Never mind. I'm scared of this game. Never mind."
That's exactly what Kingdom Come Deliverance is like.
I love that. I want to play that game.
Yeah. Dude, try awesome. Kingdom Come. But don't expect like this high graphical masterpiece.
Yeah, no, I was.
Enjoy it for what it is, and I actually think, Bibo, you might really enjoy it because it challenges you to like go within their rules of the game, and you will wanna progress, and that, I think it might be your style of game. The combat is tricky, but it's fun to get into.
Interesting.
I'm gonna go ahead and give. I have two fantasy recommendations. One is of a novel. It's a novel series. And the one I'm going to start with first is actually an anime. I think one of the greatest anime of 2021 was fantasy-based. It was like a fantasy-based world. Mm-hmm. And Bibo, I tried making you watch the first episode, I think. It's called Mushoku Tensei. Yeah. The Mushoku Tensei, it's an isekai genre, so it's reincarnated in another world. And Mushoku Tensei is just like... It's basically, Dina, I know, like, all of this sounds like, what? What are you talking about? But like, there's a genre of anime that is basically, like, all of the tropes of this genre stem from this. Mushoku Tensei is like the Lord of the Rings of that genre.
Nice.
It is the base that did everything best, and everything takes from it. It's the anime just came out 2021, but the manga was what started it all. So like the comic version, and it is one of the best anime seasons I've seen. It has everything, and it's pretty R-rated, like thematically, the themes of what's going on in it. It's pretty dark. So if there's ever an anime that I think Dean start on that. The systems of magic are spectacular.
Definitely.
The systems of the way you're introduced into the world, the characters within it. It's a really cool.
You know what I got from the magic systems, George? It makes you feel like you could do it.
Yeah,
just because of how they present it.
Yeah.
If you were in that world, like, holy crap, I have a really good grasp of what it would feel like to practice magic in that universe. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And everyone I've shown it to so far, has been very intrigued, but they're just like, I'll just let the season finish. But the season just finished recently. I think 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, if I remember correctly. It finished recently. 23 episodes, just 20 minutes an ep, but it doesn't feel like that. It's really good. So that's for anime fantasy, I would say this is what I would suggest. Hardly underappreciated, because everybody who's big on anime kind of knows this to be a really heavy hitting anime of the year for 2021. But I will talk about my personal favorite novel series, and Mark, if you're there, my brother Mark, he is the guy. If there was ever an episode I would want to have a guest on, I would want to have Mark in this episode, or maybe Tita Luna, in Ocean, to talk about fantasy. These are two people I would love to talk to about, because I don't feel like I am at all qualified to talk in very heavy detail about fantasy. But I love the genre, so I want to learn more. That's why I'd love to have this discussion with you guys, especially with Dean, who technically would want to write fantasy, what I mean? So that's always cool. But the books I want to talk about, and why I think you guys would love them, is because the books I want to talk about are the Kingkiller Chronicles. The first book is called The Name of the Wind, and the second book by Patrick Rothfuss, and the second book is called The Wise Man's Fear. The reason why this is such a unique take for me, and why I connected it to it so much, and the one who showed me this book was my brother, because he reads so much. And the first book he pointed me to was Ready Player One. And he was like, read this book, and this was years before the movie came out. Read this book. And I don't normally read, but I read that book and I loved it. And his second suggestion was like, Georgie, you read Ready Player One. I'm telling you, you're gonna love this. Don't even ask me what the plot's about, just read it. And The Name of the Wind, I picked it up and I couldn't put it down. You talk about a movie that has different races and different systems of magic, and on top of that, it has elements of what you love about Harry Potter, in that it is basically Harry Potter in a Game of Thrones universe, where the main character grew up as an actor.
Ooh.
So he grew up with a performing troupe, and that was his life, learning and maneuvering around the attributes of charm, and to get around. So every single decision he comes across throughout the story, and this is a narrative story, so it's being told as a story by an older version of the main character. It's called Kingkiller Chronicles because he's he's kind of being interviewed by somebody. He's known as a really famous warrior, or a really famous I guess you'd look at him as a Legolas or an Aragorn, a really famous dude. And he was tracked down by a chronicler who is taking the notes of his story, and you're going through. He's telling you about his story and where does fantasy meet reality within his story. And all of the decisions he makes the decisions from the perspective of an actor, like using an actor's talent to get through. He's also a musician and a singer, so much of it is centered around him evolving as a young musician while all this is happening. Like moments like his first ever live performance that you, Bibo, Dean, would be able to relate to, the feeling of the audience reacting to him, like all of these little factors, they're just so relatable for performers. So if you're at all interested in a story that just mixes all these things and it's written incredibly well, this is such an amazing series. It's by far my favorite fantasy series.
Awesome.
Even over Lord of the Rings. And I love Lord of the Rings. I'm so sorry to younger versions of me that are like, Lord of the Rings is nothing else. But Name of the Wind, for me, I connect to it so much. And I think you guys would too, personally. So I really wanted to give it that big shout out that the King Killer Chronicles, Name of the Wind, Patrick Rothfuss. There are audiobooks, Dean, of it, the first 2 books. So, you could get into it that way, but really, really spectacular world building and story, I must say.
Yeah, but there are no pictures, right? No, you're not.
No.
You're not the first person to speak super.
I think
highly
Mickey's
of
read
that.
it too.
Yeah,
And
she
Jamie
reads a
Wilson
lot.
has
Yeah,
read it,
Jamie there. He recommended that.
Jamie
too.
Wilson has read it.
The
yeah.
Alonzos love those books.
Yeah. Yes, the Alonzos love those books as well.
But yeah, I'd love to once again, which I feel like a lot of our discussions end up in this. I wish I had that Dragon Ball time dilation chamber.
Yeah.
Just carry the all the books with me and just spend 1 second finishing everything. That'd be great.
Yeah, it would be so cool, right?
Is it medieval or?
Yeah, it's medieval, Dean. It's like high fantasy setting, but I don't think they've introduced specifically elves or dwarves, if I remember correctly. But there are different races of people of beings. But I just don't think that dwarves have been introduced. Or dwarves or elves. Could be. It's been a while. It's been a minute. It's been a hot minute since I read it. So yeah. But that's definitely my suggestion.
Yeah.
I really love that story.
And it's so cool. You consistently hear just people lauding it just because of the different perspective, I guess, that it serves to the fantasy genre, if that makes sense. It's a different tack, and he's not your typical, warrior class guy.
Yeah.
I don't know. I know nothing about it outside of the things I've heard from you and a few other people, but yeah, sounds super interesting.
Yeah, no, and that's really it. That's the main. If this episode, I feel like I wanted this topic just to be able to talk about this, and then
that's awesome, and
just say read this book. It's really good. And for those of you who want a new anime to watch, and if you haven't seen Mushoku Tensei, it's Bibo. I can work with you if you could put a little graphic of the or a little picture of it. That would be awesome.
Yeah, of course.
I can work with you for the title name just so people can see it, because I really think if you're an anime fan and you haven't heard of it, then dude, it's such a good watch. Really awesome.
And it's so well animated.
Again,
yeah. We
so well animated.
We talked
but
about
again, this if there's any episode that I want, again, the audience, whoever's watching, if you have suggestions or if there are fantasies that you've looked at or enjoyed, this is the one where I'd really want to see it in the comments, especially Mickey, Tita Luna, if ever Tita Luna watches an episode of this. Mark, if you're watching, just leave down in the comments some fantasies to look out for, because this is more an episode about education than it is about knowledge.
And I hope we each of us have expressed what our tastes are when it comes to the genre, what we specifically look for, and hopefully someone will be able to share something that none of us have mentioned or we might not be aware of that we would love pala, just because we haven't come across it. So yeah, leave those recommendations in the comments, please.
Yeah, and again, to quote Bibo, leave the recommendation of fantasy genre novels, not your personal fantasies. Like just like my fantasy has always been. Especially for any Bibo fans out there, like, you know, there's a time and a place for your fantasies about Bibo.
But to close out on fantasy as a genre, I guess I think like one word that jumps out and an image that jumps out to me is little Martin Freeman excitedly running out of the Shire.
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking journey, but he says I'm going on an adventure. And I think fantasy as a genre facilitates that sense of adventure and questing. Those terms are so attached to it, right? So I think that's the main thing that appeals to us as nerdy boys whose heads are in the clouds for the most part.
Yeah, that sense of adventure. It's such a cool thing. And if ever you want to see Sam taking his farthest step from the Shire over and over again.
I've seen that.
So epic, man. I love it so much.
Is it 10 hours? Is it 10 hours?
I think so, but the effort, Sam, the determination.
I know.
To go.
Come on, Sam.
Every time.
If for anyone who doesn't know, there is first of all, someone was genius enough to find a way to put the entire movie of Fellowship of the Ring on YouTube for free. If you want to watch a 10-hour version of Fellowship of the Ring on YouTube, it's right there for you. And it's 10 hours because this person edited it so that every time in the movie Samwise Gamgee takes a step, he says it's the farthest away from the Shire he's ever been.
Yes. Every step taken.
So like running
is just genius.
Running
So
in the
genius.
mines of Moria. It's just like, this is it. Take one more step. It'll be the farthest away from the Shire I've ever been. Come on, Sam. This is it. It's over and over again. It's so funny. I love it so much.
You know, on that note, I'm gonna ask you this. Very interesting questions for you guys. I'm gonna format this in a way that let's talk about Lord of the Rings for a sec. Give me this. Which character in Lord of the Rings do you relate to the most? And do it in three phases of your life. When you were a kid and you first watched it, who did you want to be the most? When you were a teenager and you watched it, because we watched I watched Lord of the Rings like once every 2 years at the least, the whole extended trilogy. So when you were a kid, who did you want to be the most? When you were a young teenager, who did you relate to the most? And now that you're an adult, who do you relate to the most? Who do you see yourself as? Yeah, I feel like that's the character that I am. Like, Bibo, let's start with you. You want to think on it? You want me to go ahead and start?
Mine are kind of lame, so... when I was a kid...
Well,
when I was a kid, definitely Aragorn, just because his name was Strider, and it was such a cool name. And he used the sword, and everyone loves using a sword. There's that. As a teenager, I think probably still him, but like... I don't know. I don't really self-insert that much when I watch Lord of the Rings. I sort of like appreciate it more on a larger scope. But as far as who I relate to now, and maybe I got incepted when it came to this. So I don't know if you guys will recall, but I did that thread on Facebook about casting local theater actors as in the Lord of the Rings roles. I started off with George as Samwise Gamgee. I think is perfect casting. I would like to pat myself on the back for that one. And I Tita Luna, who's such a Tolkien fan, right? Cast me as Faramir, and I don't know. I sort of like started looking at him in a different way, and like, because I don't have any siblings. I can't relate to him in that regard. That's really what his entire arc is, right? It's just that he doesn't love me because he only loves my brother. but yeah, no, just that the underdogginess of his character, I guess, is pretty cool. So yeah. And I like how he's obviously...
I love that thread, by the way. Shout out to your thread.
Yeah,
that was a fun thread.
Yeah, that was fun.
That was a fun thread.
Nico Manalo for Frodo, 100%. Still stand by that.
Oh, man.
But I think what I love about him is something that I love about fantasy as a genre, really, is that he's, especially as a kid, you meet Faramir and you're like, oh, who's this guy? Why is he messing with my hobbit buddy? Stop being just a jerk. Ugh. You and your family, Boromir did it, and now you're doing it. Ugh. But like when you look at him and when you take a look at him and see how all these characters on the good side, the Gondorians and I don't know what they're actually called, but the people of Gondor. I'm blanking on what the Anduin are they whatever the men,
the people of Gondor.
Yeah. How they want to do good and they want to conquer evil and stuff, right? But like the means that they have to go through and the way they have to get their hands dirty. Is something that's been explored in a lot of other media through the years, but like the way it's introduced to you when you watch Lord of the Rings or read Lord of the Rings for the first time is beautiful. And I think Faramir is a bit emblematic of that neutralness of what the forces of good in that universe go through. So yeah, that's me.
Is it the Dunedain?
The Dunedain, yes.
The Dunedain.
But that's I think only like the royals or something. Like Aragorn is like 90 something, right? And that's because he has a longer lifespan because he is one of the Dunedain or something. So yeah. I
definitely want to hear Dean's, but I'll just go ahead and say mine because mine's pretty basic also. In that when I was young, I always found I always like played Legolas in the video games. Just everything about Legolas. Like, he's an elf. He's so cool. He's so handsome. What a like Orlando Bloom. Man, what a role. I'd love to play an elf. Love to look like an elf. I have the tendrils of an elf currently. The hair tendrils of an elf. But yeah. And then as I got into my young 20s, I definitely started seeing that, like, there's a reason Bibo cast me as Samwise Gamgee. Just a must. Like, just the Frodo. Just that dude. Like, it's the farthest I've ever been.
Take one more step.
Take one more step, Master Frodo. Sam, but now I'm just seeing myself as, a little bit of Sam, but I definitely relate pretty hard to Gimli.
You love dwarves, man. You're a dwarf in Dungeons and Dragons, right?
Yeah, I'm always a freaking dwarf, man. Like,
dwarves are awesome.
Dungeons and Dragons lately, I love making dwarven characters. My current Dungeons and Dragon character, I love his story so much. His name is Theoden. He's a dwarf. His daughter got struck with a disease, and his whole mission is to find the cure. Oh. Good writing.
That's awesome.
And yeah, so
the dwarves. The dwarves get like so shortchanged in that world, right? They're the only ones who are who weren't directly made by Eru. So all the humans and the elves get all the love, and the dwarves are just like the redheaded stepchild that they're like, ugh, go in your mind, and then go mine.
Yeah, I love dwarves as a character in general. I think they're so cool. But normally in fantasy games, like when I'm playing a game, I normally make a human character just because Bibo said he doesn't really like to see himself as he plays games. I always try to make a character that looks as much like me as I can make. Like human, not that tall. That's so sad when you say that. Not that tall, like pretty average height, and and try to make him have long hair and a beard. So I always just try and make it look similar to me. Anyway, Dean, let's answer that question, and then maybe we can talk for D&D for like a second, and then we can call it a day. Like, we have 10 minutes left. We can call it a day after that. And just,
absolutely. So when I was a kid, definitely I'm on the same page as you. I love Legolas. Just because it was just so cool. He was so cool. He like shot an orc in the eye from like 800 meters away. It's like that's awesome, and I just love that. For me, when I saw Legolas, I was like, that is what the world wants from me.
I want to ride down Timothy Oliphant's back.
Timothy Oliphant.
Sorry. I want to ride down.
Yeah, but then as I got older, as in my 20s, I think, because definitely in my 20s was I did not have the best self-esteem, so I probably related to like probably Pippin the most.
Pippin.
Because he'd just mess up all the time and like and
did we cast Dean in your thread, Beebs? We cast Dean as Dean was cast as someone.
Dean was
in that thread,
Rohan guy.
Theoden.
Yes. No, not
Was it
Theoden.
Theoden?
Theoden's nephew.
Oh,
the Rohirrim dude.
Eowyn's brother.
Yeah.
No, Eowyn's.
that's
Yeah.
awesome.
What's his name? Carl Urban.
Eowyn's
Dean was Carl
cousin.
Urban.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't
Yeah,
remember his
yeah.
name either, but that's awesome. I'd take that any day. It's fucking awesome. Yeah, I would definitely be from Rohan.
Sorry,
if,
real
if
quick.
I was-
Have you guys seen that meme video of like, I'm Aragorn, son of Arathorn. This is Gimli, son of Gloin, and Legolas
and Legolas.
of the Woodland Realm. What's your Jesse?
And Legolas.
Legolas of the Woodland Realm.
Ooh, Éomer.
Eomer, that's
okay.
his name. Yeah.
There you go.
Eomer.
Yeah.
Yeah, Eomer, I'm good. But I think nowadays I'm mostly the character that I want to be most definitely, bar none, is Gandalf for sure.
Oh yeah.
Like, come on. Like Gandalf.
older Dean.
Yeah. Just like palling around with mortals, even though
Yeah.
he's like of the same ilk as Sauron and he's been
Maiha.
alive as long as Tom Bombadil. But anyway.
And you'd be best friends with Sir Tim Patrick. Like,
Yeah.
that's cool.
Sir Tim Patrick.
You might even marry him and his wife.
Yeah. You know what? Maybe we can do a D&D episode. Like, that.
Yeah.
I think that would
One
be cool.
day.
At
Like,
least
5 minutes.
like starting, like creating our characters. Do you guys know I played tons of board games. I've never sat down and started a game of Dungeons and Dragons ever
Awesome.
in my life.
Which
So-
it's so funny because like there are certain people that would just definitely be dungeon masters, and it's very rare that when you see someone you're like, this dude would be a dungeon master. And both of you, I very much picture being dungeon masters. Like I could so picture Bibo running a campaign or Dean running a campaign, and I think
it'll
be
have to
awesome.
be Bibo because I can't read very fast. Bringing it on back.
That would be so cool if we could host like a little like one shot campaign.
Let's
And
do it,
that would
man.
that would
I'm
be
so
awesome.
in.
Yeah, let's do a quest.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah,
quick
one
one.
quest together. But I will say this though about on the topic of D&D. Do you guys know the charts, right? In terms of like character creation of like true good. I mean neutral, true
Yeah.
neutral.
Yeah.
Like chaotic and
Alignments,
lawful, chaotic, lawful and true. You know, I mean, and I love how you can really split like a character archetype into that. For those of you at the end of the episode who have never played a game of D&D, normally you follow those archetypes. It's like a gigantic 9 square, larger square, or you know,
Yeah.
that show all the archetypes. And an example, it's lawful good, and chaotic good,
Mm-hmm.
lawful neutral, true neutral, and chaotic neutral, lawful evil, and chaotic evil. So an example of chaotic good would be like Robin Hood, you know, like where Robin Hood is of good nature, but he doesn't follow the rules. And he steals for the poor, you know what I mean? So he's in the chaotic good section. Where you'd have chaotic evil would be the Joker, where lawful evil would be like Frollo from
Hunchback,
Hunchback or
Silco
Emperor
from Arcane.
Palpatine, Silco from Arcane, perfect,
There you
lawful
go.
evil. And I just personally think this of my years of playing D&D. I really think that everybody always thinks they have what it takes to pull off a chaotic character.
Okay.
But I will say this at the core of my soul. you serve no one but yourself when you choose and decide to make a chaotic character.
Yeah.
You're the only one who has fun doing it. Everyone else is just dealing with your shit. And you're the only one laughing and be like, come on, it's fun. But to me, it's like, bro, we're like a party of like heroes trying to do something for the good of the realm.
Yeah.
And you're just there like, ooh. And I know this because I made a chaotic character once and I saw that it's like, unless you really, really know how to navigate that, don't even try and make a chaotic character. It's
because,
just
like, for example, chaotic
yeah.
neutral is like super selfish, right? Well, you could argue true neutral is also super selfish, but like,
yeah, chaotic neutral is super selfish. Yeah, like chaotic neutral's like Deadpool.
yeah,
like you're just like kind of messing around and
Yeah.
like just stick to either true neutral, good, or lawful good. Don't mess with chaotic, man. Like, if you're not experienced with D&D, don't ever look at that and be like, I want to try this, because especially when you're role playing and trying to stick to your alignment and trying to stick to that for storytelling, doesn't ever.
I
go
feel
that
like
far.
though it's like, because I've watched a couple. I forget what channel. Xbox something outside Xbox. They
outside
post.
Xbox, yes.
Yeah, they post
the-
videos of their
yeah.
campaigns. Really good video, really entertaining videos, and it's like, is your priority to like succeed or just make a really good story? Because sometimes failure makes really, really good stories.
That's the thing
well,
about
for
Dungeons
people
and Dragons.
watching, yeah,
That I would improve is that I think that your alignment should change by the end of a certain amount of campaign, because that is character
depending on the
development.
choices you've made and how
Yeah.
you've acted. Yeah.
That's the thing, is that a lot of people stay really static with their characters, but I believe that, and of course there's like Dungeons and Dragons pure, Puritans is not the right word, but like
Purists.
Purists. There you go. Puritans is a whole different thing.
Whole different thing.
That would be like, no, you have to stick to your alignment. But it's like, what character in film or TV or books or novels has ever stuck to their alignment? They're always one thing at the beginning of the story and another thing by the end, and that's what either
makes it
improves
a
their lives or-
story.
Yeah, exactly.
And on that note, I would want to say, leave in the comment section also, if you were to make a D&D character, what alignment would you be? What favorite race would you have? Which character do you relate the most to in Lord of the Rings? Let us know all these things. But for now, that's all the time we have in this episode. As per usual, Bibo, Dean, thank you for your time and opinions and beautiful voices. But that's all the time we have for today. Again, my name is George Schulze. With me is Dean Dashing Rosen and Alfredo Bibo Man Reyes. And we are BetaBeard. I hope you had a great time. Like and subscribe and join us in the comment section for all of these things. Leave your thoughts. Have a good day, guys.